A new year ringing in with new fines, new penalties, and new mandates from the health care law. And the promise to lower our insurance costs, broken. The average family seeing their premiums jump more than 25% the last 5 years. How about deductibles? Well, they are up a whopping 53%. So with new health care law surprises kicking in, will 2015 finally be the year Americans rise up against it? Hi, everybody. I'm David Asman. Happy New Year. Welcome to Forbes on Fox. Let's go in focus to find out with Steve Forbes, Mike Ozanian, Sabrina Schaefer, Kerry Sheffield, John Tamney, and Rick Unger. Steve, is this going to be the year that momentum to overturn this thing reaches a crescendo?
Yes, it will, David. This is the year where the proverbial stuff hits the fan. As you mentioned, the employer mandate kicks in, even though it's above 100 employees, 50 to 99. Those companies are going to have to do a lot of paperwork. Owners are going to find out, even if they have two small businesses, the IRS is going to add up those employees and hit them as well. You have confusion about what you can deduct and can't deduct. You have the Cadillac tax, even though it doesn't kick in for another 2 years.
Penalties are tripling.
Companies are going to be raising deductibles and co-pays on that, so you're paying more, getting less, and that 25% rise in insurance premiums. The worst thing, though, is the co-pays and deductibles. That's where people are getting hit, and they don't know what coverage they really have.
And, Rick, I know you've seen these depressing from your point of view, but look at the disapproval rate of Obamacare, 59% disapprove. You really think that's going to change in the new year?
Oh, I don't know that that will change in the new year. But, David, you told the story in the intro. You told it beautifully. 25% increase over 5 years. That averages out to 5% a year. Does anybody remember what the increases used to be before Obamacare?
I got one word for you, Rick. Wait a minute. I got one word for you. Deductibles. It's the whole cost.
I'll tell you what,
Deductibles are up over 50%.
I'll get to that next, but let me finish this. It used to be if you got an 8 to 10% rise, you had a good year. You were thrilled. Some people would see 20% a year. So that is actually very good news. Deductibles, yes, they too always went up. But you know what's interesting? But you know what's interesting about it? The very people who say we want more control over our health dollars, they should be thrilled that they get a higher deductible that they can decide where they want to spend.
They should be thrilled, but they're not thrilled. Mike, look, the point is all of this has to be taken in context of what the president promised we would get from Obamacare. In 2010, he made a promise about his proposal. Let's listen.
My proposal would bring down the cost of health care for millions, families, businesses, and the federal government.
But, Mike, what we found out was what they were really talking about behind the scenes, thanks to Jonathan Gruber. Let's listen to what he said.
Even if we knew how to control health care costs, we couldn't do it politically. So what do? You're President Obama and the Congress. Well, you do what I like to think of as sort of a spaghetti approach. You throw a bunch of stuff against the wall and see what sticks.
and that's, I mean, at least the guy was being honest about it. Of course, everybody disavowed it. But in fact, isn't that what Obamacare turned out to be?
Well, yes. And, David, President Obama has proven to be a serial liar. That's what he is. I mean, remember saying keep your doctor and so forth. He was lying. But the biggest problem I have with this, besides what you correctly point out of the huge cost increases, my control of health care. Health care is very personal.
Yes.
If I want to see the doctor I want to see, I want to be able to get the type of coverage I want to get that I think is best for my family. I don't want it being dictated by President Obama and guys like Gruber. I mean, that I think is really going to cause the mood to even swing further.
I think you're right. I think that's why those polls are so much against it. But, John, there's another point. Which is that so much of Obamacare is just subsidies, just pure subsidies. People are paying for it. Look at this, 87% of the people who got the plans are getting financial assistance. It's easy to get everybody enrolled in this thing if you're willing to pay a lot more. 87% of the people now getting Obamacare are on subsidies.
Well, and that's why health care costs are skyrocketing. What we're describing has nothing to do with insurance. Insurance is what you purchase to protect yourself against the unforeseeable, the rarest of the rare. And when you buy that, it's very inexpensive. What we're describing here is insurance against routine doctor visits, or if you don't like what your eyelids look like, that's going to be very expensive, and that's why costs are skyrocketing.
All right, Sabrina, Republicans now have control of the Senate and the House, and they will be trying. Obviously, they're not going to get it overturned because the president wouldn't sign that, but they're going to try to tweak it, and they're going to try to use this part-time rule. You know, they're going to focus on making a work week 40 hours, which apparently would do a lot to kind of change some of the rules of Obamacare, right?
Right, and this is that effort by certain Republicans to sort of repeal parts of the law, right? Because they think it's easier than trying to turn over the whole thing. The problem is that in the interim, until we try to really get rid of this, it's going to have a real damaging impact on the economy. Let's remember, it's the GAO that said that this is going to add over $6 trillion to our deficits. We know that we have 20 new tax hikes that are poised to cost another $1 trillion. We know the subsidies are going to cost yet another $1 trillion over the next 10 years. We know that Medicare is going to be cut by close to $1 trillion, about $700 billion. So the impact on the economy, while our lawmakers try to sort this out, is really going to be damaging.
Well, it is. It's 1/6 of our economy. We have to keep reminding folks of that. You can't do this without it affecting things dramatically. Carrie, you had a personal experience you brought to us a couple of weeks ago. What is happening with your personal experience with Obamacare? Has it changed or improved at all?
It's been horrible. As I said on the show, I did not get to keep my doctor, period. When I shifted onto the plan, my doctor did not accept it. My premium hiked up by 18.4%. So I don't know, Rick is doing some amazing gymnastics. He's got to go see a chiropractor this year. His prescriptions are just like
what
ridiculous.
Did I say that's not true? I used the figure.
We're talking double digits. And not to mention, you're talking about the past versus the future. Future, this is a disaster. The natural progression of Obamacare is single payer. That's what liberals want. That's what Obama wants. It's going to be a disaster for deficits. The new Congress can hopefully shrink the deficit in the future.
Well, Steve, there are also some constitutional questions about it, and the Supreme Court is going to be dealing with a big one coming up in 2015. Could the Supreme Court pull the rug out from under it?
It'll certainly do. I think they will make a decision that the law is actually what it is written in the law, and the Congress and, the IRS cannot subsidize those exchanges that they've been doing in those 37 states. So then the question is going to be, what will President Obama do? Will he finally sit down and negotiate a real overhaul of Obamacare, or will he just say we're going to bull our way forward? And the key thing in the future, David, is about the Congressional Budget Office points out that in the years ahead, the growth of our economy is going to be about 2/3 of what it was historically. That's going to cost us trillions of future wealth and job creation, and the biggest villain is Obamacare.
Rick, I want to ask you, though, Rick, just sort of play out the scenario. What happens if the Supreme Court goes against the president on this one? Will he tough it out and try to do the executive order stuff, or will he try to negotiate in some way in 2015 if he loses in the Supreme?
If the Supreme Court, and by the way, just one correction, I don't think it's a constitutional issue, it's an interpretation of the law.
Well, the Supreme Court deals with Constitution.
I happen to think you're right. Well, not always. There's a lot of things the Supreme Court deals with, federal questions.
Okay, go ahead. Answer the question.
But I actually agree with you. There's a very good chance the Supreme Court will pull the rug out from under the law. If that happens, my prediction would be not that there's negotiations. The law would simply go away.
Mike, does all this matter when it comes to people? I mean, you correctly pointed out that it's the individual that finds out. I mean, the money plays a big part in the reason they don't like it, but most of all, it's they're not being able to control their own health care.
Absolutely, and David, reforms put forward by many Republicans, by the way, actually are going to move towards eliminating private practices. That's one of the things they're pooling doctors into huge hospital groups, so that your ability to go see an individual doctor at his practice or her practice, that's going away very soon.
It's going to be quite a year, no doubt. Thank you, gang. Coming up next, the one thing the soon-to-be GOP